In 1765, the authorities of the Viceroyalty uncovered something terrifying beneath the Church of San Francisco in Guanajuato. Hundreds of glass jars, meticulously labeled and arranged. For 44 years, the Ramos family had carried out more than 100 experiments on human beings, turning pain into science and tears into treasure. Recently declassified Vatican documents revealed that their activities did not end with their capture. This, perhaps, explains why even today, in certain villages of Guanajuato, elders refuse to enter churches when it rains. But before we delve into the dark history of the Ramos family, if you're one of those rare souls brave enough to uncover the hidden truths that linger behind sacred walls, subscribe now to our channel. This content isn't for everyone, only for true seekers of mystery. Tell us in the comments where you're listening from, so we know where the bravest hearts are. And if you ring the bell, you'll become part of our brotherhood of mystery hunters. Now, let's step into the shadowy world of the collectors of tears. In colonial Mexico of the mid-17th century, the city of Guanajuato gleamed like a jewel in the Spanish crown. Its silver mines had turned this mountainous enclave into one of the most prosperous places of the Viceroyalty. Cobblestone alleys snaked between colorful colonial facades, while the bells of the churches marked the rhythm of everyday life. The dry mountain air carried the scent of freshly baked bread mixed with the mineral dust that defined mining cities. The city of Guanajuato lived divided, split between the opulence of the wealthy Spaniards and Creoles, who flaunted their fortune in grand mansions and ornamented carriages, and the poverty of the indigenous people and mestizos who toiled in the mines or served in the homes of the rich. This inequality created the perfect breeding ground for desperation, and the desperate often turned to miracles. The Catholic faith permeated every aspect of life, and for those who suffered from illness or misfortune, belief in the divine was often the only refuge left. It was into this world that the Ramos family arrived in 1721. The patriarch, Father Vicente Ramos, was a man in his 40s, tall, thin, with a penetrating gaze and a neatly trimmed beard. He presented himself to the church authorities with impeccable letters of recommendation. He claimed to come from Spain, though some whispered he had spent years in Italy studying both medicine and theology. His deep voice and command of Latin quickly earned him the respect of the local clergy. He was accompanied by his 3 children. Aurelio, a serious 25-year-old who had studied medicine at the University of Salamanca. Esperanza, a 22-year-old woman with a serene face and eyes that seemed to pierce the souls of those who met her gaze. And Tomás, the youngest, a quiet adolescent who always carried a notebook, filling it with meticulous observations written in elegant handwriting. Father Vicente was assigned to the small church of San Francisco, located on the outskirts of the city. The modest temple, built of pink stone with a simple bell tower, had fallen into disrepair. Soon, the priest began restoring it with funds he claimed came from a family inheritance. What no one knew was that the true fortune of the Ramos family would come not from inheritance, but from the tears and suffering of the people of Guanajuato. Aurelio opened a small medical practice next to the church. His reputation as a physician trained in Europe quickly attracted patients from all walks of life. Meanwhile, Esperanza, who claimed to have received a divine vision from the Virgin Mary, founded a small convent adjacent to the temple. She welcomed women who struggled to conceive, promising them the blessing of motherhood through special prayers and sacred treatments. As for Tomás, he became his father's and brother's assistant, helping both in the church and in the medical practice. It was common to see him gathering herbs in the surrounding hills or studying ancient medical texts with intense curiosity. What the citizens of Guanajuato did not know was that those herbs would later be used to prepare subtle poisons, and that those ancient texts contained formulas capable of inducing illnesses that perfectly mimicked natural diseases. Soon, the Church of San Francisco gained a mysterious reputation. Miracles, it seemed, were happening there. Father Vicente conducted special ceremonies where gravely ill people would suddenly improve after drinking water blessed by him. These supposed miracles drew in ever more faithful, and with them came donations. The small church soon expanded, adding a crypt beneath it which, according to Father Vicente, was meant to store sacred relics. But what was truly stored beneath that church was far from sacred. Dona Mercedes de Urrutia, one of the wealthiest women in Guanajuato, was perhaps the Ramos family's first prominent victim. A widow with no children, she began suffering from strange symptoms, weakness, trembling hands, and bouts of confusion. Dr. Aurelio diagnosed her with a rare blood disease that, according to him, required regular and costly treatments. Every week, Dona Mercedes visited his office to receive a few drops of a mysterious liquid that, Aurelio claimed, would stop her illness from progressing. "This is truly a miracle, Dona Mercedes," he would tell her gently as he administered the medicine. "Without this treatment, your condition would worsen quickly. God has placed this cure in my hands for you." But what the poor woman didn't know was that Aurelio was slowly poisoning her with small doses of arsenic, enough to make her sick, but not enough to kill her. The drops she drank merely kept her dependent, forever ill, forever in need of the Ramos miracle. Over the years, Dona Mercedes donated enormous sums to the church, and eventually changed her will, leaving a considerable inheritance to Father Vicente. This pattern repeated again and again with dozens of victims. The Ramos family chose their targets carefully: wealthy individuals, widows, or people with no close relatives who might ask questions, and the desperate who longed for divine healing. Meanwhile, in the convent, Mother Esperanza was perfecting her own dark craft. Women who came to her seeking help to conceive were given purification treatments, herbal teas with secret ingredients, and ritual baths that she claimed would cleanse their souls. What they didn't know was that Esperanza was infecting them with mild venereal diseases, causing temporary infertility. After months of suffering, she would then administer remedies that cured the infection she herself had caused. When the women finally became pregnant, they believed it to be a miracle, a divine blessing, and donations poured into the convent. Esperanza's fame as a woman touched by God spread throughout the entire viceroyalty. One evening in 1724, 3 years after their arrival in Guanajuato, the Ramos family began a new and far darker phase of their activities. Under the flickering light of candles in the crypt beneath the church, Father Vicente gathered his children for what he called the inauguration of the Book of Tears. "My children," he began solemnly, "we have mastered the art of creating suffering and relieving it at will. But our true work is only beginning. It is not enough to manipulate the body, we must study the precise effects of our creations." Tomás, now 18, opened a large leather-bound book. On the first page, drawn in red ink, was an intricate diagram of the human body marked with Latin annotations. "I've developed a system," he said with disturbing enthusiasm, "to classify poisons according to their effects. We can record reactions, time of onset, lethal and sublethal doses. Everything will be documented here." Aurelio placed several small glass vials on the table, each labeled and empty. "And for each subject, we will collect this," he said, holding up a vial containing a clear liquid. Tears. The tears shed in moments of greatest suffering. According to ancient alchemists, they hold the very essence of the human soul. Esperanza, her expression calm and distant, added softly, "The mystical texts speak of the power within tears shed from different states of the soul. Perhaps their properties change depending on the kind of suffering, physical, emotional, or spiritual." Father Vicente smiled in satisfaction. "Then this shall be our true work, a study that no one else has dared to undertake. We will uncover the secrets of human pain as no one ever has." And thus began the systematic documentation of the Ramos family's experiments. Each victim received a code in the book, recording their name, age, social status, health condition, and the details of the treatments administered. The vials of tears were labeled with matching codes and stored carefully on shelves that soon covered the walls of the crypt. What drives an entire family to become architects of suffering? Was it mere greed, or something far darker lurking within their hearts? These questions would haunt investigators for centuries after their crimes were uncovered. As the years passed, the Ramos family refined their methods. They developed poisons capable of imitating dozens of illnesses, from recurring fevers to progressive paralysis, from mental disorders to diseases that perfectly mimic tuberculosis or malaria. By 1730, 9 years after their arrival, the family had built a vast network of informants that helped them identify the ideal victims. Nobles, merchants, and even corrupt officials provided information about newly arrived aristocrats or isolated families who could be easily manipulated. The Ramoses preferred foreigners without local connections, rich widows, or new families in the region. Their methods varied depending on the target but always followed a precise pattern. For the wealthy, the process usually began with a special invitation to attend a private service at the Church of San Francisco, where Father Vicente would offer a personalized blessing. During the ceremony, the blessed wine he served contained the first dose of poison. Days later, when symptoms appeared, the victim would remember the priest's words and return to the church seeking divine help. Father Vicente would then refer them to his son, the reputable Dr. Aurelio Ramos, who would diagnose the mysterious illness and begin a treatment. That treatment did not cure, it controlled. It turned their victims into loyal patients, dependent for years, sometimes for life. In the most elaborate cases, the Ramoses would bring their victims to the brink of death only to save them during a public ceremony, restoring them before the eyes of the congregation. These staged miracles strengthened their reputation and drew even more desperate souls seeking healing. But in the spring of 1735, their empire of deceit faced its first true danger. A clever merchant from Zacatecas named Don Alejandro Bosques began to suspect the treatments his sister was receiving. For 3 years, she had been under Aurelio's care for a supposed blood disorder, yet with every visit, her health worsened. Educated in France and with some medical knowledge, Don Alejandro secretly replaced one of his sister's medicine bottles with a mixture of honey and water, keeping the original for later analyses. Within days, his sister began to improve, confirming his suspicions. But before he could expose the Ramos family, Don Alejandro was found dead in his hotel room. The official report claimed a heart attack. What it didn't mention was that Tomás Ramos, now 29, had visited him the night before, offering him a special glass of cognac from his personal collection. The incident with Don Alejandro forced the Ramos family to change their ways. They began varying their methods, spacing out their so-called miracles to avoid creating recognizable patterns. They expanded their web of informants and bribed key officials to silence any potential investigation. By 1740, the reputation of the Church of San Francisco had spread throughout the entire viceroyalty. Pilgrims traveled from distant regions, Vera Cruz, Oaxaca, even Puebla, just to receive the blessing of Father Vicente or the miraculous treatments of Dr. Aurelio. The convent of Mother Esperanza had grown as well, housing dozens of women seeking her divine aid to conceive children. Wealth and influence flowed endlessly into the hands of the Ramos family. But most of their riches were not seen in public. They remained hidden beneath the church, in the underground crypt that had now been transformed into a vast and sophisticated laboratory. There, Tomás carried out his increasingly complex experiments. The walls of the crypt were lined with shelves filled with hundreds of glass vials, each one meticulously labeled, each one containing the tears of a different victim. It was during these years that the Ramoses began experimenting on what they called controlled subjects. Using their network of contacts, they acquired prisoners or beggars who were kept in secret cells beneath the convent. These unfortunate souls served as living test subjects for new compounds before they were used on wealthier victims. Ramos documented every test with chilling precision: the time of onset, the symptoms, the stages of decline, the response to doses and combinations. His coldness was matched only by his scientific accuracy. One of his journal entries, dated 1742, gives us a glimpse into his terrifying mindset. Subject 78, male, approximately 30 years old, minor, strong build. Oral administration of compound T14, 3 drops. First symptoms after 4 hours, profuse sweating, trembling of lower limbs. After 12 hours, fever of 39 degrees, auditory hallucinations, reports hearing bells. After 24 hours, partial paralysis on the left side. Tear collection performed during acute pain episode at 36 hours, classified as tears of physical terror. Subject deceased after 48 hours. Autopsy reveals severe cerebral inflammation and internal bleeding. Conclusion: T14 effective in simulating apoplexy, but too rapid for practical use. Reformulate for slower action. Ramos wrote these words not with remorse, but with pride. The Ramos family had already operated with impunity for more than 20 years when an event occurred that would forever change the course of their macabre enterprise. In the winter of 1745, a man named Don Miguel de Montemayor arrived in Guanajuato, a special envoy of the Spanish crown sent to investigate irregularities in the local silver mines. A cultured, observant man, Don Miguel quickly noticed strange patterns in the illnesses afflicting the city's elite. During a dinner at the governor's mansion, he met Father Vicente and Dr. Aurelio Ramos. Something in the priest's gaze unsettled him deeply. That same night, he wrote in his private journal, "Today I met a man of God whose eyes seem to come not from heaven, but from hell. There is something profoundly disturbing about the Ramos family that I cannot yet name." In the months that followed, Don Miguel began to investigate quietly. He reviewed death records, interviewed former patients of Dr. Aurelio, and gathered information about the church's finances. The more he learned, the more his suspicions grew. He discovered that several wealthy individuals had donated large sums to the church after suffering mysterious illnesses treated by the Ramoses, and that many of those same individuals never fully recovered. Instead, they became dependent on Aurelio's treatments until the day they died. Before he could send his full report to Madrid, Don Miguel himself began to experience disturbing symptoms: blurred vision, difficulty breathing, and violent muscle spasms. Recognizing the signs of poisoning, the cunning envoy pretended to fall into the trap. He continued visiting Dr. Aurelio, taking the prescribed medicines, but secretly discarding them when no one was watching. At the same time, he sent a trusted messenger to Mexico City carrying documents that detailed his suspicions about the Ramos family and requested an official investigation. When he was certain the documents had reached their destination, Don Miguel confronted Father Vicente directly, after evening mass. In the quiet of the church sacristy, the envoy revealed that he knew the truth. "I know what you and your family have been doing, Father," Don Miguel said firmly. "The poisons, the false miracles, the experiments, everything will be exposed when my colleagues arrive from Mexico City." Father Vicente remained eerily calm. "Have you not considered, Don Miguel," he replied softly, "that our work serves a higher purpose? We are not mere criminals, we are cartographers of pain. What we have learned surpasses all known medicine." "You are murderers," Don Miguel retorted, "and you will pay for your crimes." The priest smiled faintly. "I fear you will not live to see that day, Don Miguel. The poison my son has been giving you has no antidote." But what the priest did not know was that Don Miguel had never swallowed the poison. That same night, the envoy left Guanajuato under armed protection. His report would trigger an investigation that took nearly 20 years to complete, but would eventually uncover the horrifying truth about the Ramos family. Unaware of the storm that was about to descend upon them, the Ramos family continued their dark work. However, the confrontation with Don Miguel had deeply disturbed Father Vicente. He began to sense danger closing in and decided it was time to prepare for the worst. He ordered Tomás to intensify his experiments and to finish what he called his masterwork, a complete compendium of the effects of every poison and its possible antidote. By 1750, the underground laboratory contained more than 700 glass vials, each meticulously labeled and categorized according to the type of suffering it represented, physical, emotional, or spiritual. Tomás had developed elaborate theories about the mystical nature of tears. In his notes, he wrote obsessively about what he called the distilled essence of the soul, believing that tears shed at moments of extreme pain held hidden power. Meanwhile, Mother Esperanza, now 51, had expanded her operations far beyond helping infertile women. Her convent had become a place for possessed young women, though in truth, Esperanza drugged them systematically, provoking erratic behavior that mimicked demonic possession. Through theatrical exorcisms, she cured them, gaining even more fame, donations, and reverence. Dr. Aurelio, now regarded as one of the most brilliant physicians in the Viceroyalty, was invited to lecture at the Royal and Pontifical University of Mexico. His detailed studies on rare diseases were read and cited across New Spain, few realizing that his medical treatises were built upon deliberate human suffering and slow poisoning. But fate was already closing its hand around the Ramos family. The investigation initiated by Don Miguel advanced slowly through the colonial bureaucracy, but it was relentless. Officials quietly collected testimonies, reviewed church and hospital records, and followed the trail of money that led back to the Ramoses. By 1760, nearly 40 years after their arrival in Guanajuato, the net had begun to tighten. Father Vicente, now 80 but still sharp of mind, sensed the danger. He noticed unfamiliar faces in the city, strangers asking too many questions. Some of his informants within the administration had gone silent. Paranoia took root. In 1763, he summoned his children to the crypt beneath the church. By candlelight, with the shelves of glass tears glowing faintly around them, he announced his decision. "Our work is nearly complete," he said, "but I feel the danger drawing near. We must ensure that our knowledge survives, even if we do not." He instructed Tomás to finish and protect the Book of Tears, Aurelio to continue spreading his medical teachings, and Esperanza to pass her methods to her most loyal novices. Their final plan was horrifying. They decided to hide copies of their research in secret locations, prepare escape routes, and select carriers among their current patients. These carriers were to be injected with extremely slow-acting poisons, designed to remain dormant for years before finally manifesting. Each carrier was carefully recorded, their symptoms, expected lifespan, and the formula used. For 2 years, the Ramoses executed this monstrous plan, turning dozens of innocent people into living experiments, walking unknowingly toward slow and painful deaths. Finally, in May of 1765, the inevitable happened. Before dawn, troops sent from Mexico City surrounded the Church of San Francisco, the adjoining convent, and the Ramos residence. The operation, planned for years, was executed with military precision. Father Vicente, 85 years old, was captured in his quarters without resistance. Witnesses claimed he smiled calmly as soldiers shackled him, as if he had been expecting that moment. Aurelio tried to escape through a secret passage, but was intercepted. Esperanza surrendered peacefully. Tomás, cornered in the underground laboratory, swallowed a fast-acting poison he had prepared long ago for this very occasion. When the authorities entered the crypt, what they discovered horrified them. The laboratory contained over 1,000 glass vials of tears, each labeled in detail, along with hundreds of pages of human experiment records and dozens of bottles of deadly compounds. In a hidden chamber, they found 3 surviving subjects, barely alive, used for ongoing experiments. The recovered diaries of Tomos revealed the full magnitude of the crimes. For 44 years, the Ramos family had conducted experiments on more than 100 people. Some had died quickly. Others had suffered for years. And some were still alive, unknowingly carrying slow-acting poisons within their bodies. But the most disturbing revelation was their obsession with human tears. Tomos had developed a complete taxonomy of tears, classifying them according to the type of suffering that produced them. He wrote about their supposed mystical properties and performed experiments to test their effects. The trial of the surviving Ramos family members was swift and secret. The authorities, terrified that public knowledge of the case would cause panic, decided to conceal the true scale of the horror. The official report merely mentioned unauthorized medical practices and a misuse of church funds. Father Vicente and Aurelio were executed privately in July 1765. Esperanza, due to her status as a nun, was sent to a strict convent in Spain, where she lived out her remaining years in isolation. All records of her final fate were deliberately destroyed. But the government faced a chilling dilemma. What to do with the dozens, perhaps hundreds, of carriers who unknowingly still bore slow poisons in their bodies? How to find them without causing panic? And how to cure them when even the Ramos family's antidotes were incomplete or unknown? A special team of doctors and pharmacists worked in secret for years, trying to decipher the Ramos formulas and develop counteragents. Many carriers were quietly located and treated, but others were never found. Some died without ever knowing the cause of their illness. Others lived long enough to pass on mysterious symptoms to their children. The Church of San Francisco was sealed, purified in a special ceremony, and finally demolished. In its place, a small chapel of atonement was built, with no inscription mentioning what had once stood there. Over time, the truth faded into whispers and legend. But some secrets refused to stay buried. In 1956, during renovation work in Guanajuato's historic center, a group of construction workers broke through an old wall and discovered a sealed chamber that had escaped the original demolition. Inside, they found a small chest containing 12 glass vials, each holding a clear liquid, their labels yellowed with age. Beside them lay a notebook, its pages filled with precise, elegant handwriting. The discovery was immediately confiscated by church authorities and, according to official statements, sent to the Vatican for study. But within weeks, 3 of the workers who had opened the chamber began suffering from mysterious symptoms that no doctor could explain. All 3 were dead before the end of that year. Some sources claim that certain documents related to the Ramos case still remain locked within the Vatican's secret archives, stored alongside other cases deemed too disturbing to be revealed to the public. Meanwhile, in Guanajuato, a strange local tradition has quietly persisted through the generations. During the rainy season, some old families place small silver bowls on their windowsills to collect the falling rain. This water is never drunk or used. At dawn, it is poured into the earth. When asked why, most can't explain the custom's origin. But a few elders whisper that it's a precaution, a way to make sure that the tears of the sky never mix with the tears of mankind. A quiet protection against the return of those who once bottled human suffering. And what about the carriers who were never found? Some historians speculate that the Ramos poisons may have affected later generations, causing strange, inherited illnesses that still appear in certain Guanajuato families today. Even now, when the rainy season comes and the ancient church bells toll under the gray sky, the city's elders still murmur special prayers, pleas for protection against the collectors of tares. The discovery of the Ramos family's crimes shook the foundations of the viceroyalty's power. Although the authorities tried to minimize the scandal, rumors about the poisoners of Guanajuato spread throughout all of Mexico. Few people, however, know that the investigation uncovered something far greater, a network of complicity reaching into high-ranking officials and even members of the clergy. Among the confiscated documents, investigators found encrypted letters exchanged between Father Vicente and priests in other regions. The correspondence suggested that these clergymen knew about the experiments and that, in return for protection, they had received fragments of the Ramos family's forbidden knowledge. Such revelations threatened to cause a scandal of unimaginable scale. The Church intervened directly, sealing most of the evidence. Judge Don Felipe de Ursua, who led the official investigation, wrote in his private diary, "What we have uncovered goes far beyond the crimes of a single deranged family. There are signs of a hidden network, a web of forbidden knowledge spreading through the viceroyalty like the roots of a poisonous tree. I've been ordered to limit my inquiry to the Ramos family alone, but I fear we are only scratching the surface of something much darker." In 1768, 3 years after the execution of the Ramos family, a wave of strange deaths struck those connected to the case. 3 officers who had taken part in the raid died under mysterious circumstances. Judge Ursua himself was found in his study, apparently dead of a heart attack, though witnesses reported a strange smell in the room and an expression of terror frozen on his face. The documents related to the case were divided and sent to different archives, some to Spain, others to the Vatican, effectively fragmenting the story and preventing any future investigation. The Church of San Francisco was destroyed down to its foundations, and salt was scattered over the ground in a rare purification ritual. Meanwhile, the people of Guanajuato lived in constant fear, afraid that they or their descendants might still carry the Ramos curse. Some families left the city entirely, while others sought purification through intense religious rituals. Many of these rites mixed Catholic prayers with old indigenous pagan traditions, forming a unique blend of fear and faith. Historians would later call this phenomenon the poisoner's paranoia. For decades, any unusual illness or sudden death in Guanajuato immediately sparked suspicion of poisoning. Doctors were mistrusted, and many people preferred home remedies or folk healers rather than professional medicine. By 1780, 15 years after the events, the Bishop of Michoacan sent a confidential report to Madrid, describing what he called the lingering shadow of the Ramos family. In it, he wrote that Tomás Ramos's obsession with tears had given birth to strange new superstitions. Some claimed that the surviving glass vials, if ever found, could summon the souls of their original owners. Others believed that the victims' spirits were still trapped within the bottles, condemned to an eternity of suffering, suspended in liquid crystal. The case of Maria Dolores Fuentes became one of the most haunting examples of how deeply the terror of the Ramos family endured. Born in 1750, she had been only a child when the Ramoses were captured. But her mother had once received treatment from Mother Esperanza during a difficult pregnancy. In 1773, when Maria Dolores was 23, she began suffering from terrifying visions and strange physical symptoms that no doctor could explain. Her health deteriorated rapidly, and her mind seemed to unravel. In her diary, later discovered among family possessions, she wrote, "I see shells that stretch into infinity, covered in glass jars that gleam like stars. Inside each one, there are tears shining like diamonds. Every night, one of them bears my name. They are calling to me, they want me to join their collection." Maria Dolores died in 1775, after years of physical decline and mental torment. An autopsy ordered by the Viceroy revealed abnormally high concentrations of heavy metals in her organs, consistent with chronic poisoning. This discovery confirmed the worst fears of investigators, that some of the Ramos family's slow-acting poisons could linger in the body for decades, even being passed down from mother to child. By the end of the 18th century, the story of the Ramos family had already begun to morph into legend. Facts blurred with superstition, and the truth was swallowed by time. Some tales claimed that the Ramoses had made pacts with the devil. Others said they sought immortality through human tears, believing that distilled suffering could prolong life. And yet, in certain academic and ecclesiastical circles, the case continued to be studied quietly. Medical treatises written by Aurelio Ramos, published under pseudonyms, were still circulating, prized for their precise descriptions of symptoms and diseases. Few realized that these works were actually manuals of poisoning, disguised as medical texts. In 1823, after Mexico's independence, a group of doctors from the newly founded National Academy of Medicine decided to reopen the Ramos case. Their goal was purely scientific, to understand the compounds used by the Ramos family, advance the field of toxicology, and develop potential antidotes for anyone who might still be affected. But their investigation quickly met with unexpected resistance. Key files mysteriously disappeared from national archives. Research permits were denied without explanation. 2 of the lead investigators suffered suspicious accidents. Eventually, the project was abandoned, buried under the chaos of the French invasion and the rise of the Second Mexican Empire between 1862 and 1867. For a brief moment, however, the case attracted attention in Europe. A French toxicologist named Dr. Henry Beaumont obtained permission to examine some of the preserved compounds. In his notes, he expressed astonishment at what he found. The poisons developed by this family in the 17th century demonstrate a level of chemical understanding far ahead of their time. Particularly remarkable is their knowledge of delayed-action toxins and cumulative effects. Some of their preparation techniques would not be rediscovered in Europe until the early 19th century. The most disturbing question remains, where did they obtain such knowledge? That question was never satisfactorily answered. Some theorized that Father Vicente Ramos had studied alchemy in Italy, accessing forbidden Arabic or even ancient Egyptian manuscripts. Others speculated that he was part of a secret network of European monasteries conducting hidden experiments far from the eyes of the Inquisition. As the 19th century progressed, the Ramos case gradually faded from collective memory, surviving only as ghost stories told to frighten children in Guanajuato. The Church, in particular, seemed eager to bury the past, considering it a dark stain best forgotten. But the earth of Guanajuato, as history has shown, never forgets. In 1898, during restoration work inside the city's cathedral, laborers discovered a small sealed lead box hidden within a wall. Inside was a single glass vial containing a clear liquid and a handwritten note that read, "Tears of Innocence, the most powerful of all. Tr. 1765. The find was immediately seized by church officials and was never mentioned again. The 20th century brought a renewed wave of curiosity around the forgotten Ramos case. In 1956, as mentioned before, workers renovating parts of Guanajuato's old city uncovered a hidden chamber beneath layers of stone and dust. Inside were 12 crystal vials filled with a transparent liquid, each carefully labeled, along with a small leather-bound notebook written in a flawless hand. The discovery was immediately seized by church authorities. Officially, it was never spoken of again. But 2 decades later, in 1978, a historian from the National Autonomous University of Mexico, Dr. Elena Fuentes, brought the shadows of the Ramos family back into the light. Driven by a mix of scientific passion and personal obsession, Dr. Fuentes published The Tear Collectors, The Forgotten Case of the Ramos Family, the first academic work to ever treat the legend as a historical investigation. She was, interestingly, a direct descendant of Maria Dolores Fuentes, the woman who, according to 18th century records, had dreamed of endless shelves of glowing crystal jars before her unexplained death. Dr. Fuentes' research unearthed disturbing possibilities that had long been buried under centuries of secrecy. Among them, evidence suggesting that not every member of the Ramos family perished in 1765. She found references to an undocumented daughter of Tomás Ramos, named Catalina, who may have fled south to Guatemala just before the arrests, carrying with her fragments of her father's toxic knowledge and perhaps even some of the original compounds. Her work, however, faced obstacles at every turn. Requests for access to ecclesiastical archives were quietly denied. Key records disappeared. Funding was cut. And one of her close collaborators resigned after claiming to have received threatening letters written in archaic Latin. Despite the resistance, Dr. Fuentes continued her search, convinced that the true laboratory of the Ramos family had never been completely destroyed. In her private journal, recovered years later, she wrote, "The official story is incomplete. The maps and architectural plans of the old church don't align. There are deeper passages beneath the catacombs, sealed long before the demolition. The Real laboratory might still be there untouched." On June 12, 1982, Dr. Fuentes checked into a modest hotel in Guanajuato's historic center. She told the receptionist she would be meeting a local guide early the next morning to descend into the past. She never returned. Her belongings were found neatly arranged in her room. Her diary was left open on the desk. The final entry read, "I found the entrance. It wasn't destroyed, only hidden. Tomorrow, I'll see the truth with my own eyes. If I don't return, let history know that the tears were real." Dr. Elena Fuentes was never seen again. Her disappearance remains one of Guanajuato's most haunting mysteries. Some claim she was silenced for uncovering too much. Others believe she joined the long line of victims connected, somehow, to the Ramos legacy. But a few whisper something far stranger, that she succeeded in reaching the Real laboratory, and what she found beneath the ground was never meant to be seen by human eyes. Since the late 1980s, local residents have reported hearing faint echoes under the old church site, sounds like dripping water, or perhaps the quiet weeping of someone trapped far below. At the dawn of the 21st century, the Ramos case seemed like a relic of another age, a dark legend buried beneath layers of superstition, academic skepticism, and silence. But in 2010, that silence was broken. The Vatican had begun a large-scale project to digitize its historical archives, millions of documents spanning centuries of church history. Among them were files sealed under the classification Prohibitus Specimen Humani Doloris, forbidden, the study of human suffering. Few ever knew what was inside that category. But one technician, a young archivist named Marco Bellini, stumbled upon something he was never meant to see. According to testimonies from his co-workers, Marco had been scanning sealed 18th-century volumes when he accessed a set of encrypted folders labeled Familia Ramos, Guanajuato, 1765. The next morning, he failed to report for work. Security footage later showed him leaving the Vatican archives at 3:17 a.m., visibly shaken, muttering to himself. He never returned to his apartment. His access credentials were revoked, and the internal report about the incident remains confidential to this day. But a fragment of what he saw leaked into the digital world. A handful of researchers claimed that Marco had backed up one document, a scanned page from a journal titled Cartografia del Alma, the mapping of the soul. It contained a diagram of the human nervous system overlaid with alchemical symbols and annotations in both Latin and Old Spanish. At the bottom of the page was an unsettling line, signed T. Ramos, 1765. Every tear is a coordinate. Every sorrow, a pathway. When the map is complete, the door shall open. Within weeks, the image disappeared from every forum where it had been uploaded. Accounts were deleted. Servers crashed. Some believed it was censorship. Others whispered it was something else, that the file itself was cursed, infecting systems that tried to store it. By 2012, independent historians and digital archaeologists began referring to the Ramos materials as the Forbidden Archive. Attempts to request access through official Vatican channels were denied, often with polite but final responses stating that these materials are reserved for theological review only. Yet, fragments continue to surface. A microfilm copy found in a Parisian library. A transcript quoted anonymously in a German dissertation. And a disturbing recording from Guanajuato, dated 2016, a tourist filming near the foundations of the old church of San Francisco captured faint sobbing beneath the rain, followed by the whisper of a woman's voice saying, "No las destruyas, las lagrimas aun viven." Don't destroy them, the tears are still alive. The voice, according to audio analysis, bore a striking resemblance to Dr. Elena Fuentes. Whether that's coincidence, a hoax, or something much darker, no one can say. But one thing is certain, the story of the Ramos family refuses to die. It seeps through history like a toxin, hidden, silent, and waiting to be rediscovered. And perhaps, that's exactly what they wanted. Time, they say, buries all things. But in Guanajuato, time does not bury, it remembers. Centuries have passed since the Ramos family conducted their experiments beneath the old church of San Francisco. The stones of that hill have been replaced, the streets paved anew, the bell silenced. Yet locals still avoid walking near the small park that now occupies the sacred ground. They say the earth there feels wrong. Too soft when it rains, too cold when it shouldn't be. In recent years, geophysical scans performed by university researchers revealed hollow spaces deep beneath the surface, sealed chambers that match no known architectural plans. Officially, they are dismissed as natural sinkholes. But those who've seen the data claim otherwise: perfect geometric shapes, corridors, and vaults arranged with deliberate precision. As if something, or someone, still lies preserved down there. Meanwhile, modern toxicologists studying ancient poisons have encountered chemical formulas whose structures resemble the Ramos descriptions, compounds that act slowly, subtly, even across generations. One such study in 2021 compared traces of hereditary metallotoxins in Guanajuato families to the rumored slow poisons of Tomás Ramos. The results were inconclusive, but disturbingly suggestive. Perhaps the family's legacy was not just in glass vials or forgotten books. Perhaps it was in blood. In one of her recovered letters, Dr. Elena Fuentes wrote, "History is not written in ink, but in what survives us, the patterns, the fears, the things we still refuse to understand. The Ramos family may be gone, but their work continues through us, in the questions we're too afraid to ask." And tonight, as the rain falls again over Guanajuato, droplets slide down windows and gather in silver bowls, just as they did centuries ago. Each drop glimmers under the dim streetlight, like a tiny soul trapped in glass. If you listen closely, between the thunder and the toll of distant bells, you might still hear it. A soft, rhythmic sound. Drip. 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 Tears, falling from the sky, and from somewhere far beneath the earth. The story of the Ramos family has no true ending. Because suffering, like memory, never dies. It only changes form.